Hi, this is the week that we start preparing to write the personal essay, which is the longest of all the types of writing that we'll be doing this summer. But before I talk about that, I want to talk about rhetoric and genre and mentor text and identity, because those lay a foundation for why we do what we do in this class. This is RWS 305. Writing in various situations. And part of RWS 305 is exposing you to new types of writing that you probably haven't done before, like poems. Why? Because in your life outside of the university, you will need to develop new styles of writing. And it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. I can't possibly teach you all those styles of writing. But what I can teach you, and what this class is designed to teach, is developing strategies for learning new styles of writing. And it's my belief that by exposing you to new styles, you really can gain those strategies. You can learn how to learn a new style of writing. Doing that is all about writing rhetorically, about adapting to your audience, who you're writing to specifically, and your purpose, what you want to accomplish with the writing you're doing. And that brings us to rhetoric. What is rhetoric? If I were in a first year class, I would ask this question. And I would say, what is rhetoric? And students, because they're fresh out of high school, would raise their hands and say, it's persuasive writing, or it's argument, or it's analytical writing. And all of those answers are a little bit right, but they're missing the essence of rhetoric. One of the definitions that we like to use in rhetoric classes is the definition of rhetoric given to us by Aristotle. And that is that rhetoric is the ability to determine the available means of persuasion. In other words, you have a message, an idea that you want to put forth into the world to a specific audience. You want to talk them into doing something, or to thinking a certain way, or reconsidering something they already made up their mind on. And you think, how can I do this? What are the available means of persuasion? And after determining all the available means of persuasion, you choose one of them, the one that you think is most likely to help you be successful in changing somebody's mind. Socrates put it a little differently, but it's the same idea. He said that rhetoric is the art of moving the soul with words. Using rhetoric, using rhetorical language, using speech that is well thought out, isn't it just about, like tapping into somebody's mind? It's about tapping into their soul, getting them to feel in their gut that you're right, that they should reconsider what they were thinking before and embrace the ideas that you have. Philip Johnson, another rhetorician, says rhetoric is the art of framing an argument so that it can be appreciated by an audience. And I just love that, because you've encountered arguments you did not appreciate that just made you mad. And clearly that person, if they were trying to reach you, did not do a very good job. And yet sometimes you'll encounter arguments that you don't even know that they're arguments, because they just make so much sense and they just seem right. And that is a person that has framed their perspective, their opinion, their argument in a way that it was appreciated by you. Last definition of rhetoric, and this one is more about writing rhetorically. E. Shelley Reed, who you have just read, says that we write rhetorically when we do three things. We write about what we know about or what we want to know about. We show and don't just tell, and we adapt to audience and purpose. This is a synthesis of all those three previous ideas. Is like, we know what we want to talk about it. We feel very strongly about it. And so we go about trying to figure out, like, what is the best way to convey these ideas so that an audience can truly see what we mean, not just be told what we mean. And we recognizing that our purpose and our audience have to be paid attention to. Reed says, when we write this way, we write rhetorically. That is, we're paying attention to the needs of the author, that's us, and the needs of the audience, rather than the needs of the teacher or the rules in the textbook. Because I'm going to tell you, in the real world, your teachers and your textbooks are not as relevant as they might seem while you're in the university. And that brings me to a new idea. So let me see if I can connect it. This is the idea of genre. Now, I said there are available means of persuasion, and some of those available means are different styles of writing. That's what a genre is. It's a style of writing. And every style of writing has unique patterns, and those patterns matter to the audience. Because you can't just write a poem and submit it as a resume and get the employer to take you seriously, because they are expecting specific standards, conventions, characteristics. Means that when you take up a genre, you need to adapt what you want to say to fit the styles that are appropriate to that style of writing. Why follow the genre patterns? Well, obviously, it helps somebody track the information. If you're defying expectations, they're not going to say, oh, you're so creative. No, they're going to say, why is the information not there where it's supposed to be? And so think about what you want to accomplish and the best way to accomplish it. And you choose the genre that works, the genre that's expected. Following the standard genre patterns means you communicate more clearly. It also means that people take you more seriously, and you're more likely to achieve your purpose. Now, let's say in the real world that you are asked to create a genre you've never used before. How do you know what how do you make it seem like you know what you're doing? Well, you could ignore the genre conventions. After all, you're creative, but really, some people won't appreciate that. Or you can find a mentor text, for example, an example of the genre to use as a model. And you have just done this with the poem that you wrote. And you may have felt uncomfortable at parts while you were drafting the poem, but you at least had a guide to help you. And I've read 5 of the poems, the 5 that were submitted when I created this video, and they were all very, very good. And in my experience over the semesters that I've been using this poem to teach the concept of a mentor text, I've seen a lot of good poems. And so I anticipate that yours is good. You'll know when you get your grade, but yeah, sort of, yeah. That's true. What is a mentor text? How do you use one? A mentor text is a guide to the structure, not the topic, although it might be how to approach the topic. How do you use it? Examine the text carefully. Look it over. Analyze the structure. How do they start it? What are some patterns that are inherent in the structure? And then you know what you want to say, and you're going to adapt the patterns and the structure to fit your topic and your purpose. Here is that poem. I am from clothespins, from Clorox and carbon tetrachloride. I am from the dirt under the black porch, black, glistening, it tasted like beets. I am from the forsythia bush, the Dutch elm whose long gone limbs I remember as if they were my own. You'll notice I am from, I am from, I am from. There's some repetition there, some concrete details, smells, scents. Smells and scents are the same. Images, taste. I am from fudge and eyeglasses. Yeah, it's very concrete. It's very visual. There are sounds, not here, but later on. There are smells, there are tastes. I tried to do the same thing with my poem. I am from sunshine, from the train tracks in Phoenix and Pearl Harbor Elementary School in Honolulu. I'm from the suburbs of Denver, a red brick bungalow, surrounded by red brick bungalows. I wanted my audience to see what I saw, swing sets and vegetable gardens and an overgrown blackberry bush with thorns, sometimes general, sometimes specific. I could see those patterns and I had my own story. And so I created my own poem. Now, I don't teach you the poem because I think that you will all now change your minds about becoming engineers and nurses and decide to become poets. No, our purpose in this class is to learn to write new contexts, to learn strategies for writing new genres, and to help you develop greater awareness of your rhetorical choices. I want you to be able to think about the options available to you and then weigh the options and choose the one that you think will be most successful in helping you to achieve your purposes. Those are the types of skills that matter in the real world. I actually used this skill way back in about 2006. I was working as an executive assistant at a small nonprofit that was rapidly growing, and I had absolutely no business background at all, but they asked me to create an HR policy manual, something that was not included when I got my creative writing degree and the other major, which was teaching French in secondary schools. Yes, HR policy manual was not on the agenda, and I don't think I had ever even seen one. But this was my job, and I needed to do that. And so I looked on the internet and I found examples of mentor texts to see what information needed to go into an HR policy manual, how it might be organized. I looked at statutes that referenced laws in California. And then I took what I knew about the organization and its culture, and I used the ideas from the mentor texts, and I created an HR policy manual that, although it's been revised, is structurally the same as what I wrote back in 2006. This strategy of using mentor texts and looking at available rhetorical choices definitely has value in the real world. So I'm going to give you another genre, one that you may never use again in the future, and you probably have never used up until this point. And I do this on purpose, not to just be a horrible person, but to help you develop those skills in a context that's unfamiliar to you. So you're going to write a personal essay. This is not a formulaic genre. The poem was pretty basic, but this personal essay has lots of possibilities and lots of ways to organize, and some are funny and some are sad and some are thoughtful. Even though they will all be very different, there are some genre characteristics. Now, I could just tell you what those were, but I want you to develop the skill of identifying those so that you can use that skill in the real world. So I'm going to ask you to read multiple examples and look for what those essays have in common. What topics do they address? How do they address those topics? What structures do they employ? How do they engage audiences? How do they build arguments? How do they use rhetorical appeals, like ethos, which is the trustworthiness of the author, pathos, evoking emotions in the audience, and logos, which is just to make something make sense. How are they using rhetorical strategies like comparing and contrasting or description? Eventually, you're going to take one of the provided examples as a mentor text and you're going to chart its structure very carefully, because this is the structure you're going to adopt and adapt for your own personal essay. I will give you 2 characteristics that I want you to know, because I have to set up everything that you're going to do so you know why you're doing it. And the first characteristic is that personal essays tell stories, not for the point of telling stories, but they're stories that are told for a reason. Stories with a point. Briggs and Woolbright, who are a couple of writing center scholars, talk about the importance of narrative. And they say narrative provides a way to speak things otherwise unspeakable, to give voice to that which would otherwise go unheard. In other words, we see the story and we feel the idea behind the story. It illustrates an idea, a claim, an argument that if it were just made straight up, it might bother us, or we might disagree. But the story shows that, at least in this situation, it's true. Harriet McBride Johnson is a disability rights activist, and she talks about the power of stories from a different perspective. She says storytelling is an activity, not an object. And she says stories are the closest we come to shared experience. Like all stories, they are most fundamentally a chance to ride inside someone else's head and be reminded that being who we are and where we are and doing what we are doing is not the only possibility. There's another world out there. And when we read somebody's stories, we get to occupy that world, to see what the author is seeing. And when you tell a story, you have that opportunity to allow somebody else inside your head doing what you are doing and seeing what you are seeing. Now, I've chosen 2 essays for you to read and annotate as a class. The first is by my friend and colleague, Callie Linfor, who works in the hallway right across mine in Storm Hall West. I can't wait to see her in person. And she wrote Joyous Survival, the Literacy of the Hillside Strangler, and Anything Extra We Know. Now, you are not the primary audience. She was writing for the San Diego Area Writing Project in 2002, and this is a group of writing teachers. She is making some assumptions about that audience that are probably less true now, but were very true back at the turn of the century. And in other words, she's assuming that writing teachers are primarily female, white, and middle class. Barely true in 2002. And that they have white attitudes, middle class attitudes, female attitudes. And she wants to push back and say, hey, there's another way to think, because, well, that's what arguments do. Now, her argument is totally relevant to this audience, but I think it will also be relevant to you. This is definitely not an academic argument. Enjoy her story. She's got unique strategies to engage her audience. You're going to see lots of pathos and ethos. Think about how she's building ethos, because this isn't the normal thing where somebody shows how knowledgeable they are. The second one I want you to read is Bronson Koenig, What I Found in Standing Rock. Now, this was published in the Players Tribune 2016, and this is a magazine that allows professional and college athletes to tell their stories, to create arguments about what matters to them. And the Players Tribune is largely read by sports fans, as you might imagine. And so, like he's a leading college basketball player in 2016. And so obviously he builds his ethos just by his reputation, but that's not going to be sufficient to create the argument that he wants to create. And so his honesty and his vulnerability they do strengthen his argument. They build that trustworthiness. And he's got an argument that he's framing the rights of Indigenous people in a way that is going to appeal to sports fans who might not have thought about this. But honestly, it's really effective for people who aren't sports fans, and I say that from experience. And once you're done with those two, you get to choose. And I've got so many options for you. I think that you will enjoy them. Enjoy them. Yeah. And then you get to choose your own mentor text from the ones that I provided. The other characteristic, the personal essay, that I want to give you a hint is, as you're reading and you're looking for the argument, keep in mind that not all arguments are in your face, think as I do arguments. Some are more subtle and ask you to think. So I've got identity, and then I'm almost done. What's identity got to do with it? Well, Callie Linford, Bronson Koenig, they're relying on their identities to build characters that allow readers to see through their unique experiences, to experience new ways of being. And they've got to engage us in active listening and empathy building, which means they have to be very strategic about which parts of their identity they share with us and how they share them. They're going to challenge their audiences to think in new ways. Now, it's a new genre, and learning a new genre can make you feel uncomfortable. That is okay. This is a learning space. And learning new things almost always feels uncomfortable. Just go with it. If you've got questions, ask me. If you want to visit me during my office hours, make an appointment and we can talk about it. You're going to be fine.